Hi, this is Laura Staley, and I'm back with another video about Excel. Now, the topic of this video is printing, and it is one of those topics that I describe as it's more complicated than it seems like it would be. Now, I am not going to get into the ethics or the opinions about printing on paper. There are some people who they just don't like to print. There are some people who like to print everything. I am just here to give you the tools that you need to print well. And I would argue that if you do need to print a file and you can use these tools, that you will waste less paper because there are so many things that can go wrong when you're printing. And I will show you some of those as we go along. Okay, let me show you this file so that you can see some of the problems that we're going to talk about. This is the first page and it looks fine. And then notice this is the second page. Now the problem with this page is that there's no column headings on it. The title at the top is there, but the column headings that identify what is in which column aren't there, as they aren't on the third. Now that should be the end of this printout, except for the fact that the data was one column too wide to fit on one page. So I have 3 pages of this last column as well. And that just doesn't make any sense to someone looking at it in the printout. So we're going to talk about ways to fix these problems. Now you can see then, but here, when you come into the print area, you have a preview here. And if I were to scroll down, you can see that there are some problems with this file. So if we were to come in here and everything was fine, we could come in here, we could set the number of copies that we want, we can choose the printer that we want to go to, we can print which pages if we only want part of it. For example, I printed the first 3 pages of this file. So I went from page 1 to page 3, and then I didn't print the whole file. Okay, so once we have everything that we want, I would click the print button, and that would send it to the printer. I'm not going to do that in this video because it makes a lot of noise. So, but that is what we would do. Now you can preview your margins and that type of thing. I click down on this button in the lower right hand corner. There's 2 little buttons. There is zoom to page, and then there is show margins. So what this is doing is it's showing the margins to me so that I can see what is going on. And that's what is indicated by these little lines that are here. And so I could play with the margins and even try to drag it out. I've never been real successful using these in here unless it's just a minor little thing. But there are some people that I've known who have come in here and they've changed the margins in here visually, and that has worked for them. That's never really worked for me. But I will show you other ways to deal with margins. Okay? So I'm going to go back and let's talk about some other things. Now, usually you sit on the home page, and in this case, we are going to go to the page layout view or the page layout tab on our ribbon, because that is where a lot of the options we're going to use are. The other place where we can find them is in the print area. Now, some of these commands are both in the print area and on the page layout tab, and I'm going to show you how to do both, but you only really need one. I don't know how many classes that I taught over the years where I gave 2 or 3 different options to do the same thing. And then after the class, I would be at people's desks and they would be asking me questions and I'd be watching them. And they would do that thing that I'd show them in class. Each one person would do it a different way. And they did it in the way that made sense to them. So as I show you these different ways, you only need to remember one way to do every command. and ignore the rest, because who wants to ignore things? Who wants to remember things that you are going to use? But don't get bogged down in all the details. Choose what works for you. Okay, so first, if I go back to File and Print, notice that there is this first option under Settings for Print Active Pages and our Print Active Sheets. And so basically what that means is that whichever worksheet or worksheets I have chosen, that it will print those. And that's really the default of what happens when I go to print. I can also print entire workbook. And what that does is if I have multiple worksheets, which in this particular file I do, it will print the entire thing. Okay, the other option that I have is print selection. And what I can do is I can come in here and say, you know what, I just want to print, oops, I'm moving, sorry. I just want to print those cells, and that's all I want to print. I could go to File and Print and change it to Print Selection, and only the cells that I had highlighted would show up in the print area. When I hit the print button, they would be all that printed. So you can choose just subsets of your file to print. You don't have to print the whole thing or entire worksheets. Okay, let me set that back to Print Active Sheets. Okay, now the next thing that is down here is print one-sided. Print on both sides. That's a function of your printer and whatever you have set up, whether you have that option. And then there is collated or uncollated. The default is collated, which means that if you choose to print multiple copies of a file, that it'll print all the pages of that file and then do it again. Okay, and then portrait orientation. Down here, portrait or landscape. I always set that up as I'm setting the file up. I don't ever use that here in the print box. But if you ever needed it, it's one option. If you just found you had too many columns in one file, you wanted to try to flip it landscape from portrait, you can try that, or vice versa. Okay, something else that you have that is an option is the margins. Remember I talked about you can adjust the margins over here, and that never really worked for me. However, just over here on the left, I can come in and I can choose normal margins, wide, narrow, customize it, and all that type of thing. So if I went to narrow, then if you look at my printout over here, that last column is now on this sheet. Okay, I am going to undo that because I want to show you another way of accomplishing that as well in a moment. Okay, so let me come out here. Now let's look on the page layout ribbon area. Notice that there is margins here, and I have the exact same options. Normal, wide, and narrow, or I can make custom margins. And so all of those exact same options are available here. There is also orientation here, which I tend to choose orientation from here. I don't know why, I guess because it's the way I've always done it, but that is an option. And then some of this other stuff we're gonna talk about in a couple moments. Okay, but notice that these options are out here on the page layout as well as in the print box. Okay, now, if I go back to File and Print, then I'm going to scroll down And there's another option down here that I wanted to show you. It's scaling. And what that means is that it gives you some options that will let you scale your document automatically so that it'll fit better. So notice I have fit sheet on one page, or fit all columns on one page, fit all rows on one page. So basically, fit sheet on one page means every single thing in this file is going to be on one page. Remember, I have hundreds of rows in this file, so that's not going to work. But I have one extra column that I know I can cram on. So I could go to fit all columns on one page. And then over here, notice that I have the exact same effect as when I chose narrow margins. So choose one. If this is your situation, then choose margins or scaling. You don't need them both, but use the one that works for you. Okay, something else that you can do on the page layout tab is to set a print area. So if you have part of your file that is just really important and you only want to print that area and you don't want to be constantly selecting it, you can set a print area. So let's say that in my file that I just want to print this area because they're the top sellers or for whatever reason. I can go to page layout and go to print area and set print area. Now notice when I go to file and print, only that area is showing. Now you need to be careful of this. As a trainer, I showed this and somebody went back to their desk and they said it. And a couple of days later, they were almost in tears because they were trying to print their file, the whole file. And all they would do is print this one little area and they could not figure out what the problem was. And the problem is they had set a print area and then they forgot about it. And so, be careful of this because if you set it and forget about it, then you're going to swear that your computer is possessed. But it can be handy. And I've seen people use it and use it well and they remember, and there's not a problem. So keep that in mind, but use it sparingly and only really if it works for you. One of the nice things is if I go to file and print, and I do have a print area set, I can come here to the print active sheets and I can say click on ignore print area, and then it'll go back to my whole file. So if you come in here and you remember that's there, then that's one way around it. So if I come back here, I can go to print area and say clear print area, and then I'm just back to normal. So that's one of the things that I suggested people do who really like the idea of print area, because they were printing one area and then their boss had given them some changes and they would make the changes and they'd want to see the printout and they'd make some more changes and all those types of things. But the thing that I stressed is you may want to clear that print area before you finish with your file, just so you don't forget about it. Okay, so for those people who it works, this could be a really handy option. Now, the last thing I want to cover is down here in the lower right-hand corner, down on the bottom, over on the right-hand side, directly to the left of the slider that makes your file bigger or smaller, there is a page break preview. And what this does is it puts you in page break preview mode, which means that I can scroll and from here see what is going to print on what page. And let's say for some reason I want these last two columns to appear on their own page. I can put my pointer over this blue line. It turns into a double-headed arrow, and I can click and drag, And now I have page 1, and then the other 2 columns are on another page by themselves. So I'm going to drag that back to the right because I do not want that to happen. But there have been times when I had a lot of columns and I wanted to group things logically. And so I went into this view and then just basically set up things so that they would print well. Now, notice that there are 2 other buttons to the left of that one. I'm just going to go back to the first one, which is normal view, and that gets me out of page break preview. When I was editing this video, I discovered that I had skipped one major command, which is a major part of printing. And in fact, it will solve one of the problems I identified in the video at the beginning when I showed you the printout. And that is how to show these headings on every printed page because they don't automatically appear unless you set it up. And the way you set it up is on the page layout tab on the ribbon. Over on the right side of that section, there is a command called print titles. So I'm going to click on that. And when we come in here, it brings us up into the page setup box. And there's a lot of things in here that you used to have to come in here to set up that are now out on the ribbon and in the print dialog box. So you don't need to do that anymore. But print titles, you still need to come in here. So we are going to be dealing with this section right here, which is print titles, rows to repeat at top, and columns to repeat at left. So the first line will be all the rows that you want to repeat at the top of every single printed page. And then the second row will be the columns on the left that you want to repeat on every single printed page. So if your file, unlike mine, goes off to the right with more columns that can fit on a page, you will probably want to repeat this first column on every printed page so that people can know which salesperson it is or whatever that first column is designated as. So in this case, however, I just want the rows, but I'm going to show you both ways. So what I do is designate which rows to repeat at top. I click in that row and the cursor appears in this box. And I'm going to click the arrow at the end and it's going to shrink the box and it's just going to be up here. Now I am going to click on whatever rows I want. Now I could click on these 3 rows and it would show all 3 of them. But I have the title in the header and it's just repeated information and it's going to take up a lot more space at the top of every printed page. So instead, I'm just going to click on row 3. Now it doesn't matter where in the row I click. I've been clicking over here on the left, but you could click anywhere in the row and it's going to choose the entire row. It's all or nothing. You can't just print part of a row. You have to print the entire row at the top of every page. So, which is what I want in this case. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to click on the down arrow and it's going to come in and I'm going to have it filled in here. Now I'm going to click on the columns to repeat it left just to show you how to do this. And in this case, notice that I can just click on the column behind the box because I can see it and it will fill it in. So I don't have to come over here and shrink it and then bring it back. I can just click on it if I can see my target. So you can do it either way. Now I am going to click OK. Then I am going to go to File and Print, just so that I could show you that in the preview section, when I scroll down, that the titles stay at the top there, which means that they are going to print on every page. And notice I have it set up so that that last column is not on the first page. But notice how the salesperson now is beside the total column, so I would know which salesperson has sold how much. So you can use these to help make the printout make sense. And I use it a lot of times. And if you are going to send a file to someone that you think they're going to want to print it, you may want to go ahead and set this up for them. And so that when they print it, it makes sense to them. So that is print titles. Okay, now that we've been through all of that on how to fix a file so that it prints well, let me show you the file that I showed you at the beginning. This is the same 3 pages, which at the beginning was 6, because this last column here was on another page. And as you can see, everything is on the same page, and there is headers and footers. Now, I didn't cover those in this video, but I will in my next video, so keep an eye out for that. And basically, if you want to look at the data, there's one. Notice that the column headings are on this page up here, and so I know what column is which, and page 3. So it's a whole lot easier to read than it was before. Now, what I used was I just narrowed the margins, which put everything on the same page. I could have used scaling, but I'm only going to use one of them. So yeah, as long as what the options you choose work, then hey, it's all good. So that is a look at this file now that it has all been fixed. And as you can see, it's a whole lot better than it was. Okay, I hope this video gives you some ideas of how you can print well so that you don't waste a lot of time and paper and resources and just to have a lot of aggravation. As I said, use the options that work for you and ignore the rest. Now, I do have a blog post that I will post down below that has everything in print. So if it went kind of fast and you're not quite sure where to find things, you may want to go over and take a look at that blog post and find whatever information you need there. Thank you very much, and I hope you look for my next video, which is going to be on a closely related topic, headers and footers. And it's actually part of printing, but I wanted this video to not be so long. So keep an eye out for that, and that will finish up the topic of printing. You have a good day.